Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in. Today I wanted to make a video on 45 cans. I've made a video similar to this in the past, but I think the lensing has changed a little bit. As you guys know, the tax itself is going to fall off in January of 2026. And while you still have to register your property with the federal government, which is bull crap, I don't agree with that. The fact that you don't have to actually pay the $200 to conduct the transaction does change the lensing a little bit on that. So in the past, it's always been, well, we want to limit the number of those transactions that we engage in because we don't like giving the government money for no reason, right? Well, I don't like giving the government money for any reason, but you guys get my point, right? So while registration is still very bad, and the Republicans screwed us on that, they could have fixed that, but they didn't. The fact of the matter is that financial disincentive is going to go away. So I wanted to revisit 45 cans. Again, they still suck, but there are some instances where you might consider a 45 can. And what I'm going to do today is discuss with you why 45 cans are not as good as a lot of folks that don't know what they're talking about are going to tell you that they are. And then what you might consider a 45 can for, if that's something that you absolutely want to do. That and more after a quick word from today's sponsor.
Today's video is brought to you by the Modern Gun School. This is an accredited online university. Whether you're looking to learn a few things or trying to break into a career in the firearms industry, this place is set up to be streamlined and work for you so that you don't have to burn a large quantity of money to get an education in the firearms arts. And that gives you some latitude to pursue other educational pursuits like, a business degree on top of your firearms education. So go check them out at Modern Gun School and tell them that I sent you. Let's get into today's video. So while we have these cans apart for cleaning and maintenance, I'll show you how they work.
Kills Yellow Jackets dead.
All right, we're going to end up super cluttered up on this table today because I've got a bunch of different things to show you. But first off, I think the easiest way to illustrate this is to show you two devices from the exact same manufacturer, different variants of the same can. One's a 45 can, one's a 9mm can. These are the Obsidians from Rugged Suppressors. And anybody who knows anything about cans will tell you that these are both fantastic devices. In fact, if you're going to buy a 45 can, I'd probably say this one right here, this is your guy. But we have the 9mm variant, the Obsidian 9, the Obsidian 45, and you can see that these devices are roughly the same. In fact, the modules are interchangeable on these. They have the same diameter, and to illustrate that for you, we'll just go ahead and I already took some measurements off screen that we're going to go ahead and use. But if I take this caliper, I don't even care what it is. I just lock it into place. Make sure I'm spinning it the right way. Yeah. So 1.23. Same thing on that one. So same diameter, but their length is a little bit different. So this one, the Obsidian 45, a little bit longer. It comes in at 8 1/4. This one comes in at 7 5/8. So roughly the same size can. And you might say, well, this can over here, the 45 can, has more volume. But that's not actually the case, because while it does have more physical volume, as far as functional volume, we have to consider that these devices are bored different inside. So if we were to check the bore diameter of the 9mm variant, we're going to come out at roughly 0.41. If we check the 45, it's going to come out at just about 1/2 inch. So although the 45 variant has more volume overall than the 9mm variant, there is less functional volume inside this device, because if you think about the sequence as the bullet is traversing this can, when the bullet is in the gap, it has occluded the space. when the bullet has traversed the space and we're trying to pressurize the next chamber, that little hole right there is no longer occluding the airflow. So it's essentially not there. So as far as the functional volume of one of these devices, you would subtract the overall volume from the bore volume. And I've done that for you. And if we were to crunch the numbers really quick, and I'll throw the math up on screen so that you guys can benefit from it and check it, of course.
I think that we can agree that those numbers are not that much different. Just a really quick post-production insert. Those numbers that I just gave you are not the entire story. They're just a theoretical representation of the concept. The situation is a little bit more complex than that. Those numbers would be correct if the baffles ran all the way from the top to the bottom, but we know that that's not the case because there's a giant expansion chamber at the bottom of the can. And you're like, yeah, Kurt, you didn't account for the expansion chamber. Yeah. Except for most of the time, the expansion chamber is full of a Nielsen device, which is a big hunk of metal.
The next thing that I want to point out is I've also stripped out the end cap here and the piston device. There you go. And the 9mm can. You can see that they are roughly equivalent as far as their weight is concerned. And that is because there is a maximum weight that you can add to the end of a semi-automatic pistol, even with a booster device. This one has a booster disable sleeve on it, where it will still function. So you could conceivably make the device bigger to capture more volume, but that means it's going to be heavier. And the heavier the thing is, the less likely it is to function, even with a linear inertial decoupler on it. The next thing I'd like to demonstrate for you is this is a piston. And generally how this works is it's going to go in this sleeve and there's going to be a spring in there. This is called a linear inertial decoupler, or lid, or booster, or Nielsen device, many, many names. But the purpose of this is to basically sit in here, and then as the gun recoils, the spring is depressed and this piston is allowed to move a little bit, and that decouples the mass from the barrel. Now, there are limits to that, as I mentioned just a few seconds ago. But when this is operating, there are little grooves that home it in there, but you can see that there's a lot of play in there. Now, that is reduced quite a bit by the homing sleeve here, but you can see that this homing sleeve, for instance, is not perfect either. It is pretty close, but there's still a fair amount of play in there. And that means that there is a limit to how long this can be. So there's a limit on the weight, there's a limit on how long it can be, and there's a limit on how girthy it can be, how big around it can be, because if it's too big around, then you have to get higher and higher pistol sights to seat over the can body. Now, there's been a few things that have been done over the years that have tried to exploit geometry to do this. For instance, the Silenzico Osprey is a kind of like a square-shaped can, so the bore is what it is, but there's a whole bunch of extra volume down underneath here that they're trying to capture, and it doesn't really work all that well. There's also geometry of the baffles and things like that that really play a huge role. It's not all volume, but generally speaking, when we're talking about 9mm cans versus 45 cans, manufacturers typically use the same size can body, and they pack the 45 hardware into the 9mm. In this instance, you can see that they've redesigned these. The 45 actually came first for the Obsidian, and then the 9 came afterwards. So they refined the design a little bit, but as I mentioned earlier, these things are technically interchangeable as far as the modules are concerned because the threads are the same, the diameter is the same, and all that. But generally speaking, if you have two devices that are manufactured kind of in concert with each other, then typically same size can body, different size hardware. And what that results in is a functionally less efficient device in a 45 can than a 9mm can.
Look at what he's done. He's cut a trail in the yard.
All right, I think that we're done measuring stuff for now, so we'll go ahead and, move this stuff out of the way, clear a little bit of space, because we're going to shift gears a little bit. Because I can hear people in the comments already, but Kurt, my 45 ACP is subsonic, and that means that I don't have to buy specialty ammo to use my can. Well, first of all, you don't have to use specialty ammunition to shoot out of a can. You don't have to use subsonic ammunition. You can totally use full-powered 9mm ammo if you want to. You just get a little bit better performance out of your 9mm can if you're using subsonic versus supersonic ammunition. And yes, 45 ACP is typically under the sound barrier, usually about 1,000 feet per second or less, depending on the loading. Of course, there's some really fast stuff out there, but typically speaking, when we're talking about 45 ACP, the velocities of 45 are typically lower. For instance, if we were to pull out this right here, this Fiocchi blasting ammo, 860 feet per second, right? If we were to pull out this subsonic 9mm, this is doing 850. You can see very comparable as far as the velocities are concerned. This is a 158 grain, this is 230 grain, so you're getting a heavier bullet. I think what a lot of people get hung up on that about is that, okay, this is a specialty ammunition, but everybody buys ammo online these days anyway, unless you live in California, right? Everybody buys their ammunition online. So it's not really that you can't find this stuff versus this stuff you can usually find in a store. So there is that dynamic about it, and that is a good point. However, if we remove the buying at a retail shop, which you probably shouldn't be buying your ammunition at a retail shop anyway, because you're gonna get gouged on your street pricing. When we take that element out of it and start looking at the performance of a 45 ACP versus a 9mm, as far as the sound signature is concerned, when you fire your cartridge out of your handgun, do you hear the bullet as it flies down range? Or do you first hear the loud boom when it goes off? Which of those is more pervasive when you shoot? Is it the loud boom or is it the bullet flying down range? I would say that most people, when they're shooting a handgun, they're more concerned about the loud boom. And here's the thing. A 45 ACP round that's doing 860 and a 9mm round that's doing 850, roughly the same speed, this round is louder as far as the report of the gun is concerned. I can almost fire this without hearing protection. It's still going to be damaging to your hearing, but it will be noticeably quieter, unsuppressed, shooting this round versus this round. And said another way, 45 ACP is louder than 9mm. When we're talking about subsonic 9mm versus subsonic 45, the 45 ammunition is going to be louder. You can go online right now, find any video that you want from any reputable source, and you will see that if they're metering those side by side, the 45 is going to be louder.
So what that's going to result in is, and I'm just going to throw these numbers out there, there are going to be exceptions to these rules. There's going to be some that are better than others. We'll have a range. 45 cans are going to meter somewhere around 132 to 142, something like that. And your 9mm cans, when shooting subsonic ammunition, are going to meter somewhere around like 125 to 138, somewhere in there. Again, there'll be exceptions. But generally speaking, if you're shooting the same class of ammunition, subsonic ammunition, then the 9mm is just going to have a better sound signature.
This is subsonic. Normal 9mm ammunition is not subsonic. This is going to be louder regardless than this. Now, full-powered ammunition is going to be more comparable, and you're going to have the supersonic crack. So you can expect the performance of a supersonic 9mm round to be about the same as a full-powered 45 ACP round, even though this is subsonic as far as the sound signature is concerned. And you can go out and check me on the data. There are lots of people out there that do and have published their suppressor testing data with comparable and professional grade meters. You can find the data. It speaks for itself. And you might say, well, Kurt, you know, that's a specialty ammunition. That's going to be expensive. Well, it just so happens that I looked this data up for you, and this is no longer available in this box, FYI. So actually, let's do this. This is no longer available in this packaging. It looks a lot more like this one. It's still the same product. It's called the same thing. It's just they changed the way the box looks, so everything is a little bit more uniform. Looks like this. If you were to search and find this today, which I did, the average that you're going to find is roughly 54 cents a round for this 45 ACP. This subsonic specialty ammo, you're going to find for roughly 42 cents a round. So yes, this is specialty ammunition, which means that you can't all the time walk into your local mom and pop shop and find that unless you tell them to stock it for you on a regular basis. But it's going to be 10 cents cheaper than this crap over here. So not only is this going to be louder, the can's going to be less efficient, and the overall package going to be less enjoyable for you to use, this can also being heavier, this is going to be cheaper to shoot. So now that we've established that suppressing 45 ACP is a dumb thing, it's not economical, it's not efficient, the cans are heavier, you're just better off to suppress a 9mm with subsonic ammunition. You might say, well, Kurt, I want to suppress my 45-70. To that, I would say, all right, then you're going to have to use at least a 45 can, if not a 50 caliber bored can. And typically, when we're talking about these kind of devices, pistol cans, I just so happen to have an exception to the rule on the table. Many 45 cans are not rated for 45-70. Just so happens that the Rugged Obsidian 45 can. Rugged did not pay me to do this video. I haven't talked to the guys from Rugged in a long time. But guys from Rugged, you can call me and I will take your money, right? Many 45 cans are not rated for 45-70. And even if they are, you have to buy a separate module to disable the linear inertial decoupler. And you should also consider reducing that to the K configuration, because any kind of wonkiness that is in there is going to exacerbate any kind of baffle misalignment. And I highly suggest that you get a direct thread module, if available, and go away from something like this. And what I would say to that is that you're probably better off, if you're trying to suppress a 45-70 or other rifle like a 44 Magnum or something like that, lever gun, then you're better off going with something that is a dedicated device that is designed to do that and only that. Now this thing, for instance, this is a Whip machine. Is this the... Yeah, this is the Mod 1 in 45. They also make one called the freaking 45. But this device is specifically designed for suppressing rifles in those kind of calibers, like 45, or like 45-70 and 44 Magnum and things like that. This will not function on a pistol, for instance. So you're better off looking for something specific for your rifles instead of trying to get something that kind of meets all of the, or checks all of the boxes, because this is just not going to perform as well on a 45-70 as this device is going to, because it's just, this is not built to do this. This is built, actually, excuse me, this is built to do handguns and things like that. This is built to do rifles. This can do rifles, but it's not going to be as good as this at rifles. So I hope that makes sense. But then again, unless you're hunting bison or something like that, then you're probably better off going with a 357 like this and using a 9mm can like this F4.